Every bruise they leave on my skin during the day, I match with one of my own in the silence of the forest at night. They mistake my quiet endurance for weakness. But they're wrong. It is the patient sharpening of a blade they will never see coming. Chapter 1. The Silent Howl. The only thing more damning than the pack's hatred is the hollow silence where my own wolf should be. It's a constant, aching void in the center of my chest, a space filled only with the scent of old paper and dust that clings to the pack library, my only refuge. Here, the whispers of history are louder than the sneers that follow me. Every beat of my heart feels like a traitor's drum, counting down the moments until they finally decide I'm not worth the air I breathe. Today, that drum beats faster. The scent hit me first, not the clean, earthy musk of a true pack wolf, but something sharp, artificial, a cheap floral perfume clinging desperately to a power that wasn't earned. Lyra. She sauntered to my table, her two shadows trailing just behind. Their presence sucked the warmth from the hallowed room. My fingers tightened on the brittle pages of the ancient tome, the delicate paper threatening to crumble. She leaned in, her voice a sickly sweet melody meant to curdle the blood. Well, look what the cat dragged in. Or in your case, what the wolf left behind. Her friends snickered, a sound like scraping stones. I didn't look up. Meeting their eyes was an invitation, a challenge I couldn't issue. My world shrank to the faded ink on the page, a history of our people they spat on, a power they didn't understand. Still reading your little fairy tales, Ivy? Lyra's perfectly manicured nail tapped the illustration of a celestial wolf, its fur shimmering with starlight. Hoping you'll read yourself a soul? Silence. My silence was my shield. My silence was my weapon. She hated it. Answer me when I speak to you, wolfless trash, she snarled, her voice cracking. She shoved the heavy book. It skidded across the table, its spine cracking with a sound that echoed the breaking of my own resolve. Just as the fury began to simmer, a new scent cut through the air, old parchment and dried lavender, a presence as ancient and steady as the library itself. Elara, the pack's historian. Her wrinkled face appeared at the end of the aisle, her eyes clouded with age, missing nothing. Lyra and her followers straightened up instantly. They feared no one, except the woman who held all their secrets. With a final venomous glare, Lyra hissed, "This isn't over," and swept away. The quiet that returned was different, heavier. I slowly pulled my book back, my hands trembling. The broken spine felt like a personal wound. The celestial wolf is a powerful symbol, a soft voice murmured. I looked up into Alara's kind eyes. She moved without a sound, placing a fragile, rolled-up piece of parchment on the table. Power is not always about the noise you make, child, she whispered, her fingers brushing mine. They were cool and dry, like old leaves. Sometimes it is about the strength required to remain silent. She smiled, a small, secret thing, and then she was gone. My fingers unrolled the parchment. It wasn't a page from a book, it was a map, hand-drawn with markings I'd only ever seen in the oldest, most forbidden texts. It led deep into the heart of the woods, to a place marked with a single, shimmering crescent moon. A new kind of tremor, one of terrifying hope, ran through me. This map was more than a path. It was a question. Chapter 2. Bruises and Starlight. Following the whispers of Alara's gift, I fled the suffocating walls of my tiny, empty home. The map felt like a live thing in my pocket, a secret heart beating against my leg. Out here, under the cold, silver eye of the moon, the forest was a different world. The air smelled of damp earth, of pine needles, of the wild, untamed magic the pack tried so hard to civilize. Here, I wasn't wolfless Ivy. I was just a shadow among shadows, every bruise they leave on my skin during the day. I match with one of my own in the silence of the forest at night. I found the clearing exactly where the map promised. a perfect circle of flattened earth, ringed by ancient, silent oaks that seemed to hold up the sky. This was it. The ancient training grounds. My own breath plumed in the chilled air, a lonely cloud in the vast darkness. My goal tonight was simple: survive my own rage. I moved through the forms, my body a blur of motion. A block, a parry, a low sweep that sent dead leaves scattering like frightened birds. My muscles screamed. The ache was a welcome fire, burning away the cold humiliation of the day. Lyra's taunts echoed in my head, each insult a new drop of fuel. Wolfless trash. My fist connected with the rough bark of an oak. Pain, sharp and blinding, shot up my arm. Good. Pain was real. A reminder that I was still here, still fighting. I sank to my knees, panting, knuckles bleeding. It would have been so easy to give in, to let the despair swallow me whole. That's what they wanted. They mistake my quiet endurance for weakness, but they're wrong. A twig snapped, in the darkness, behind me. I froze, every muscle tensing. My heart hammered against my ribs, a wild, panicked thing. I wasn't supposed to be here. This land was forbidden. If I was found, banishment was the kindest punishment I could expect. I slowly rose, turning to face the sound. I couldn't see anything. The forest was a wall of impenetrable black. But I could feel it. A presence. Heavy. Primal. Overwhelmingly male. It was a pack wolf, I was certain, but the power rolling off him in waves was unlike anything I had ever felt before. This was something ancient. Something absolute. I held my breath, waiting. The silence stretched, thin and tight. For long, agonizing moments, nothing happened. The presence didn't move closer, didn't retreat. It just watched, judging, weighing. Was this a test or a trap? Finally, the feeling receded. It vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind only the cold night air and the lingering scent of pine and ozone. My body shook with adrenaline. Who was that? The long walk home did nothing to calm my frayed nerves. My small house was just as I'd left it, dark, quiet, achingly empty. Pinned to the door was a notice, its stark white paper glowing in the moonlight. A mandatory pack gathering. Tomorrow night. A fresh wave of dread washed over me, cold and sickening. Another spectacle awaited. But as I clutched the secret map in my pocket, a new dangerous thought took root. It is the patient sharpening of a blade. They will never see coming. Chapter 3. The Alpha's Cage. The air in my war room was stale. It smelled of old leather, drying ink, and the metallic tang of conflict that never, ever ended. Maps littered the massive oak table. Little carved wolves showed troop movements, skirmishes, deaths, so many deaths. My wolf paced relentlessly beneath my skin, a caged beast rattling the bars of my control. He was bored with politics. He craved a real fight. So did I. My beta, Marcus, stood opposite me, his face a mask of grim duty. "The reports are confirmed," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Alpha Tian has moved another unit to the northern border. He's testing our defenses. Again." I dragged a hand over my face, the exhaustion a physical weight. "Kian is a rabid dog, Marcus. He wants a war because he's forgotten what true peace costs." "An alliance would sure him up," Marcus pressed. "The Clearwater Pack has 3 ranked unmated she-wolves. A union would secure our eastern flank." I let out a short, harsh laugh. "A union. You make it sound so civilized. You mean I should sell myself like breeding stock?" The bitterness in my own voice surprised me. My wolf snarled in agreement. He would choose his own mate, or he would have none at all. This conversation was a familiar one, a dance of duty and defiance. "Adrian," he said, his tone softening slightly, "your father did what was necessary." "My father is dead," I growled, the word sharper than I intended, "and his necessary choices left us with enemies on all sides. I will not be chained to a female I do not want. Marcus sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. He was my father's man. Sometimes the gap between our generations felt like a canyon. He didn't understand that I yearned for something real, a partner, an equal, not a political trophy whose scent didn't even stir my wolf. Then at least attend the gathering tomorrow night, Marcus said, changing tactics. Show the pack their alpha. Remind them of their strength. It is the full moon. There will be options. Options. He meant the ranked she-wolves of our own pack, all vying for the position of Luna, all of them parading their power, their beauty, their ambition. The thought turned my stomach. It was a market, and I was the prize. But he was right. The pack needed to see me. Fine, I bit out, the word tasting like ash. I will go. Marcus nodded, satisfied. He saw it as a victory, a step toward stability. He couldn't feel the iron bars of the cage closing in around me. He couldn't hear the desperate howl of the beast inside me, a beast that was sick of being a king, and just wanted to be a wolf. I pushed away from the table, the scent of the room suffocating me. I needed air. I needed something else. Resigned to my duty, I strode from the room, entirely unaware that I wasn't walking toward a political gathering. I was walking toward my fate. Chapter 4. Scent of Fate. The night of the full moon was always the worst. A raw electric energy pulsed in the air, a wildness that made my skin crawl, because it was a song my own blood refused to sing. I stood at the edge of the great clearing, a ghost haunting the edges of the bonfire's golden light. Hundreds of wolves mingled, their laughter loud, their scents a dizzying mix of power and belonging. I tried to make myself small, to fade into the shadows. My only goal was to survive the night, to be seen by no one. But a ghost can still be hunted. Emerging from the throng, Lyra's malicious smile was a slash of red in the firelight. I knew I smelled something pathetic, she purred, her cronies fanning out beside her, blocking any escape. My heart began its frantic, traitorous rhythm. Leave me alone, Lyra, I whispered, the words lost to the crackling flames. Did the little mouse squeak? She mocked, stepping closer. Before I could react, her friends grabbed my arms. Their grips were like iron. Panic, cold and sharp, shot through me. They dragged me from the safety of the shadows, pulling me into the center of the clearing, into the light. The laughter died down, replaced by a low murmur. Every eye was on me, hundreds of them, judging, condemning. Our pack is the strongest on this continent, Lyra's voice rang out, high and triumphant. But we still have filth like this hiding in our midst, a wolfless runt, a disgrace. They shoved me hard. I stumbled. My knees hit the hard-packed dirt. The ground was cold. Humiliation was a hot flush on my cheeks. I squeezed my eyes shut, wanting to disappear. Then, everything changed. A sudden, absolute silence fell over the clearing. Not a whisper, not a breath, and a scent. Pine and ozone, wild and ancient. The same scent from the forest. It washed over the clearing like a tidal wave, drowning out everything else. A power so immense, so suffocating, that it stole the very air from my lungs. He was here. I opened my eyes. Alpha Adrian stood at the edge of the crowd, staring directly at me. His eyes were like molten gold, burning with an intensity that pinned me in place. The entire pack parted before him as he moved. He didn't walk. He stalked. A predator. Each step was a hammer blow against my sanity. He didn't stop until his shadow fell over me. The world narrowed to him, the sharp line of his jaw, the raw power coiling in his shoulders, the furious storm in his eyes. He knelt, in the dirt, before me. His fingers, strong and calloused, gripped my chin, forcing my head up. The touch was electric, a shock that jolted every nerve in my body. His gaze bore into mine, searching. His nostrils flared. A low sound rumbled in his chest, a sound that was not human. It was a deep, possessive growl. Then he spoke a single impossible word, a word that was not a promise, but a cage. Mine. Chapter 5. The Alpha's Claim. The word was ripped from me, from my soul, from the very core of the beast that lived beneath my skin. Mine. My wolf was roaring, a triumphant, possessive hurricane of instinct that deafened me to everything else. For years, he had been a restless, dissatisfied predator. Now, he was singing, all because of the scent, her scent, rain-washed ferns and wild lavender and something else, something impossibly, achingly pure. It was the scent of home, a home I'd never known. It filled my lungs, ignited my blood, silenced every rational thought in my head. She was the one. I was still kneeling in the dirt, my fingers locked on her delicate chin. Her skin was soft, so soft, and she was trembling. Her eyes, the color of a stormy sea, were wide with terror. Not adoration. That single fact was a shard of ice in the firestorm of my elation. Why was she afraid? Then the pack's shock finally broke. "Her!" a voice shouted. "She's wolfless!" Another spat. "He can't be serious! She's a blight!" The murmurs swelled into a roar of outrage. They were insulting her. My mate. A black, murderous rage surged through me. My vision tunneled. The beast demanded blood. I rose to my full height, slowly turning to face my pack. I let my power, my raw, untamed alpha authority, crash down upon them. The clearing fell silent once more. Every wolf, even the strongest warriors, lowered their heads. Their fear was a thick, satisfying scent in the air. "Challenge me," I said, my voice a low, brutal growl, "and see if I let you live." No one moved. No one breathed. When I turned back, she was scrambling to her feet. "No, please," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Just let me go." Let her go. The idea was so absurd my wolf snarled in my head. Let her go back to them? Never. She was mine to protect now. I had to get her away from here, to safety, to my home. "You're coming with me," I stated. It wasn't a request. "I won't," she defied, taking another step back. Her chin was lifted, a flicker of fire in her terrified eyes. It was magnificent. But we didn't have time. Leaving her here would be a death sentence. I closed the distance in a single step, my hand closing around her arm. She flinched. "You will," I commanded, my voice softer, but no less absolute. I began to lead her through the parted sea of my stunned packmates. Her resistance was a live wire against my skin, an infuriating, intoxicating, silent battle of wills. The walk to my home felt like an eternity. I had just won a public battle without lifting a finger, but the real war, the one for the terrified, defiant female whose arm I held in an iron grip, had only just begun. Chapter 6. A Cage of Gold. The Alpha's house wasn't a home. It was a fortress of polished dark wood, cold stone, and suffocating silence. The heavy oak door closed behind us with a final booming click, a cell door locking into place. The air inside was thick with his scent, pine and dominance. It was everywhere. On the leather chairs, in the woven tapestries, in the very air I was forced to breathe. It felt like I was drowning in him. He released my arm. The sudden absence of his touch left my skin feeling cold and strangely empty. He moved to a stone fireplace, his back to me. A king in his castle. I was the prisoner. "You will be safe here," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. "No one will harm you." Safe? The word was a bitter joke. My safety was the last thing on my mind. My freedom was. The terror from the clearing had receded, replaced by a cold, hard knot of defiance. He could claim me, but he couldn't own me. He turned, gesturing to a plush sofa. Sit. There are things we must discuss. I'd rather stand, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. And there is nothing to discuss. You made a mistake. I am not whatever it is you think I am. I am no one. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. A mistake? My wolf has never made a mistake in his life. He knows what you are. You are my mate. I am wolfless, I shot back, putting all the scorn the pack had ever shown me into that single word. A broken thing. I cannot be your mate. I cannot be anyone's Luna. I don't give a damn what you are, he roared, his control finally snapping. The power that rolled off him was a physical blow, making the air crackle. It forced me to take a step back. My wolf chose you. That is the only law that matters. There it was. His wolf. His choice. His law. I was just an object to be claimed. My anger burned away the terror, leaving behind a cold, hard clarity. I looked him straight in the eye. I would not cower. Not anymore. Then your law is not good enough, I said, my voice quiet but laced with steel. I have spent my entire life being defined by what I lack. I will not trade one cage for another, no matter how gilded the bars are. I took a breath, letting the silence hang between us. I won't be your Luna trophy. I won't be a symbol for your pack to either worship or despise. And I will not be a conquest for your wolf. I saw the confusion warring with the fury in his expression. No one had ever spoken to him like this. If you want me, I finished, my voice unwavering, then you will choose me. You will choose Ivy, the girl, not the mate, not the Luna, me. The silence that followed was absolute. He stared at me, his jaw tight, a storm of emotions churning in those golden eyes. He could have struck me down, he could have forced my submission, but he didn't. After a long, tense moment, he gave a single, sharp nod. The grudging respect in his eyes was a more significant victory than any battle I could have won with my fists. The war was far from over, but I had just won the first campaign. Chapter 7. The Gilded Cage. The morning after the storm came the silence. A deep, suffocating quiet that filled every corner of the Alpha's massive house. I woke up in a bed softer than a cloud, in a room larger than my entire home. Sunlight streamed through colossal windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, captured stars. It was beautiful, exquisite, and it was the most terrifying cage I had ever seen. This was my new reality. After our confrontation, Adrian had simply pointed to a grand staircase and said, "The second door on the left. We will speak in the morning." A dismissal. He'd agreed to my terms, but on his own time, in his own space. I hadn't seen him since. Now, driven by a restless energy, I began to explore. The house was an echo chamber of one man's solitude. Polished wood floors gleamed, reflecting my lonely image back at me. Grand portraits of stern-faced alphas, his ancestors, I presumed, watched me from the walls, their painted eyes cold and judging. Room after empty room unfolded before me. A formal dining hall set for 30, a ballroom with a floor so vast it could hold the entire pack, a study lined with books that had never been opened. There was no life here, no warmth, no laughter. It was a museum dedicated to power, a monument to loneliness. My goal was simple. I refused to become another exhibit. Hours bled into one another. I felt like a ghost, haunting the edges of a life that wasn't mine. The silence began to press in, to feel heavy, like a physical weight on my shoulders. I had to find a way out. Not of the house, but of this stifling stillness. I needed to move, to fight, to feel the familiar burn in my muscles that reminded me I was alive. That's when I saw it. In a long, shadowed hallway, behind a tapestry depicting a great, bloody battle. The wall wasn't quite flush. A thin, dark line where there should have been none. My heart gave a little trip hammer beat. Curiosity, sharp and insistent, pushed aside my caution. My fingers traced the edge of the tapestry, finding the cool, smooth surface of a hidden door. It swung inward without a sound. The air that drifted out was completely different from the rest of the house. It smelled of old sweat, of chalk, of rusted iron, and something else. Potential. I stepped through. The space was enormous, a cavernous training facility hidden away like a forgotten secret. The floor was covered in worn, padded mats. The walls were lined with weapons I'd only ever seen in history books, ancient swords, quarterstaffs, bows. A thick layer of dust covered everything, suggesting it hadn't been used in years. Why was this here? And why was it hidden? This was a warrior's sanctuary. This felt more like a home than any other part of this fortress. I walked to the center of the mats, the silence here feeling different. It wasn't empty. It was waiting. I could almost hear the echoes of growls and the clash of bodies. I wondered how long it would take you to find this place. His voice, a low, rumbling thunder, came from the doorway. I spun around. Adrian stood there, leaning against the frame, his arms crossed over his powerful chest. He wasn't angry. His golden eyes were filled with an expression I couldn't quite read. "My grandfather built it," he said, his gaze sweeping over the dusty room. He believed a wolf's true strength came from the discipline of the body, not just the beast within. He pushed off the wall, walking toward me with that same predatory grace. He stopped just a few feet away, the air between us crackling with a new kind of tension. "You want me to see Ivy?" he stated, his voice a low challenge. "You want me to choose the girl, not the mate?" He paused, his eyes raking over me, from my defiant stance to my worn-out clothes. "Then show me what she can do." He wasn't just offering to train me. He was daring me to prove I was worth the trouble, and it was a dare I had no choice but to accept. Chapter 8. Fire and Friction. The next day, the waiting silence of the training room was replaced by a tense, crackling energy. The air was thick with it. He stood in the center of the mats, stripped down to a simple pair of black pants. No alpha airs, no grand pronouncements, just a warrior. The raw, coiled power in his body was a visible thing, a promise of violence held in perfect check. For the first time, I wasn't just seeing the alpha. I was seeing the wolf. "The enemies of this pack won't care if you have a wolf or not," he began, his voice flat and hard. "They will see you as a weakness, a target, my weakness." His golden eyes locked onto mine. "I will not have a weakness." His words were like stones, but I refused to flinch. I had spent my life being called weak. I was used to the weight of the word. "Then it's a good thing I'm not weak," I said, my voice quiet but firm. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Prove it." And so it began. It wasn't training. It was a punishment. A relentless, brutal assault on my body and my will. He showed me no mercy. He pushed me, shoved me, threw me to the mats again and again. Every muscle screamed. My lungs burned. Sweat stung my eyes, plastering my hair to my face. He was a force of nature, an earthquake, a hurricane, and I was just a girl trying to stand in the storm. He was trying to break me. Or maybe he was trying to force something to break out of me. "Where is it?" he growled, his body caging mine on the mat, his weight a crushing pressure. "Every wolf has a beast inside. Where is yours? Fight back." His frustration was a palpable thing, a scent like burnt ozone in the air. He didn't understand. My strength wasn't a beast waiting to be unleashed. It was a quiet, stubborn fortress I had built brick by painful brick my entire life. He lunged again. This time, something inside me shifted. It wasn't rage. It wasn't a beast. It was instinct. A memory from an ancient text. A diagram on a forgotten page. Use the river's strength. Do not be the stone that breaks against the current. Be the reed that redirects it. Instead of resisting his charge, I moved with it. I twisted, my body flowing around his, using his own momentum, his own overwhelming strength, against him. My foot swept out. My hand found his shoulder, a sharp, fluid shift of my entire weight. The world turned upside down. There was a heavy, whooshing thud. The air rushed from his lungs, and the storm was over. He was flat on his back, the alpha of the Silver Fang pack, pinned to the mat. I was kneeling over him, my forearm pressed firmly against his throat, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The silence in the room was absolute. Shock, his and mine, was a tangible thing. His golden eyes, wide with disbelief, stared up at me. I expected fury. I expected him to throw me off, to end this humiliating defeat. Instead, a low sound started in his chest. A chuckle. It grew into a full, deep laugh. A sound so unexpected, so genuine that it shattered the tension into 1,000 pieces. It was the first time I had ever heard him sound human. He stopped laughing, but the smile lingered in his eyes. The air between us changed. The space that had been filled with violence and frustration was now thick with something else. Something hot. Dangerous. Unspoken. His gaze dropped to my lips. The world stopped turning. In one powerful, fluid motion, he surged up. His mouth crashed down on mine. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a brand. A clash of wills and fire and friction. It was frustration and surprise and a raw, stunning hunger that stole the breath from my lungs and set my entire body on fire. And the most terrifying part? I didn't pull away. Chapter 9. Whispers and Poison. The kiss hung in the air between us for days. An unspoken, charged thing. We trained. We fought. We circled each other like two wary wolves, the memory of that fiery contact a constant, humming tension. He was still brutal in his methods, but something had changed. A flicker of respect in his eyes. A new, dangerous awareness in the way he'd steady me with a hand on my waist, his touch lingering just a second too long. The alpha was still there, but now I could feel the man too. Then he cornered me after a grueling session. "There is a formal dinner with the pack elders tonight," he said, not looking at me. "You will attend." It wasn't a question. It wasn't a request. It was a command, a reminder of who was still in charge, a test. Entering the grand dining hall on his arm felt like walking into my own execution. The room was filled with the pack's most powerful members, old, grizzled warriors and stern-faced she-wolves whose gazes were as sharp as knives. The air crackled with their silent judgment. Whispers followed us like a cloud of poison ivy, rising and falling as we took our seats at the head of the long, polished table. I could feel their hatred, a cold, heavy blanket of it, and sitting just a few seats away, her eyes gleaming with malicious satisfaction, was Lyra. I kept my head high. I ate the rich food that tasted like ash in my mouth. I endured the glares and the suffocating silence directed at me. Adrian was a wall of impassive strength beside me, ignoring them all. But I was not made of stone. Every whisper was a cut, every sneer a fresh wound. Lyra chose her moment perfectly. During a lull in the conversation, she stood, a look of faux concern on her face. "Alpha," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Forgive me for speaking out of turn, but there is a matter of pack security I must address." All eyes turned to her. The sacred moonpetal spices in the Alpha's kitchens, the ones used only for the most holy rituals. I fear they have been tampered with. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "In fact, when I was passing the guest wing earlier, I'm certain I smelled them, coming from Ivy's room." The accusation landed with surgical precision. Gasps echoed around the table. It was a brilliant lie, insidious. It painted me not just as an outcast, but as a blasphemer, a thief who defiled their most sacred traditions. The elders looked at me, their expressions hardening from simple dislike to righteous fury. They didn't need proof. My wolflessness was proof enough for them. But my eyes weren't on them. They were on Adrian. My heart hammered against my ribs. What would he do? He rose slowly, his presence silencing the room instantly. His face was a cold, hard mask of fury. "Are you accusing my mate, your future Luna, of being a common thief, Lyra?" His voice was dangerously soft, a predator's whisper. "I only say what I smelled, Alpha," she replied, though a flicker of fear touched her eyes. "Then your senses are failing you," Adrian declared, his voice booming with absolute authority. "The spices are secure. I checked them myself this morning. This discussion is over." He sat down, a final, undeniable command. The matter was closed. Publicly. But I saw it, just for a split second, before the Alpha's fury had descended, before the absolute authority had taken over. I saw it in his golden eyes, a flicker, a shadow of uncertainty, a momentary wavering as he looked at me. He had defended me. He had protected his claim. But did he actually believe me? The public threat had been silenced, but a new, more dangerous poison, the seed of doubt, had just been planted right in the heart of our fragile, fiery truce. Chapter 10. The space between. The doubt from the dinner was a ghost between us, a cold space that even the heat of our training couldn't seem to burn away. So we fought. We communicated in the only language we both seemed to understand, the language of bruises and sweat, of tangled limbs and ragged breaths. He was pushing me harder than ever before, forcing me to the very edge of my endurance. Every muscle in my body screamed in protest, a constant burning fire. I could feel the shift in him. This was no longer just about testing my skill or forcing a wolf to the surface. This was something else, something more desperate. His touch lingered, a hand on my back to steady me, his fingers splaying wide, the heat of his palm searing through my thin shirt. A grip on my arm to correct a form, his thumb stroking absently over my skin. Each touch was a spark on a trail of gasoline, and my body, my treacherous body, was starting to burn. He wanted something from me, something I wasn't ready to give. And the frustration rolled off him in waves, as potent as his pine and ozone scent. His wolf was a caged storm. Every time he touched her, this impossible, infuriating, intoxicating female, the beast threw itself against the bars of his control. Mine. Mate. Complete the bond. The words were a relentless chant in his skull. He saw the flicker of his own doubt in her eyes after the dinner, and it had terrified him more than any rival alpha. He had to erase it. He had to prove to her, and to himself, that she was his. So he pushed her. He needed to feel her strength, to see the fire in her spirit, because it was the only thing that soothed the raging tempest inside him. Her scent was a constant torment. It filled the training room, filled his lungs, filled his head with impossible thoughts of pulling her close and never, ever letting go. But she held back. She met his force with a frustrating, beautiful grace. She gave him her strength, her defiance, her sweat. But she kept her soul locked away, and that small, untouched part of her was the only thing he truly wanted. It happened in a blur. A lunge, a parry, a misstep. We went down in a tangle of limbs, rolling across the padded mats until we came to a stop. He was on top of me, his powerful body caging mine, his legs tangled with mine. My hands were pressed flat against the solid wall of his chest, his heart hammering a wild rhythm against my palms. Our faces were inches apart, breathing the same air. His golden eyes were dark, stormy. The alpha was gone, and in his place was just a man filled with a raw, desperate hunger that stole the air from my lungs. The air crackled. The space between our lips was a universe of unspoken tension. I saw his gaze drop to my mouth. I saw the muscles in his jaw tighten with restraint. This was it, the moment where the fire would finally consume us both. My heart stuttered, waited. But he didn't kiss me. With a low, guttural growl that was pure frustration, he pushed himself off me. He rose to his feet in one fluid motion, turning his back to me, his hands clenched into tight fists at his sides. The cold air rushed back into the space he'd occupied, leaving me feeling strangely bereft, shaking. "This is not enough," he bit out, his voice a raw, jagged thing. Then he strode out of the training room, leaving me alone on the mats, alone with the ghost of his touch, the echo of his hunger, and the maddening, unresolved fire he had ignited deep inside me. Chapter 11. A different kind of wolf news of arrival. Alpha's arrival rippled through the pack like a tremor before an earthquake. Alpha Cian of the Shadowcrest Pack. His name was spoken in hushed, wary tones, not because he was known for brutality, but for the opposite. He was cunning, diplomatic, a silver-tongued wolf who won battles with words and alliances, not just claws and fangs. He was here for a temporary truce meeting, a political necessity that had Adrian on edge. The Alpha of the Silverfang Pack was even more guarded than usual, a thundercloud of dangerous energy stalking the halls of his own home. He had barely spoken a word to me since our last session in the training room. The space between us had become a frozen chasm. To escape the oppressive atmosphere, I sought refuge in the pack's gardens, a rare splash of disciplined beauty amidst the rugged practicality of the compound. I was tracing the velvety petal of a deep red rose when a shadow fell over me. I expected Adrian. My shoulders tensed, but the scent was wrong. Not pine and ozone, but sandalwood and cool riverstone. I turned to see a man I had never seen before. He was tall and lean, where Adrian was broad and powerful. His hair was the color of dark honey, and his eyes were a startling, intelligent green. He smiled, a slow, easy thing that held no threat. "Forgive me for intruding," he said, his voice smooth and calm. "I saw you from the path. You seemed at peace, a rare sight in this place." My hand dropped from the rose. "I find it where I can," I replied, my voice cautious. "I am Cian," he said, giving a slight, respectful bow of his head. "Alpha Cian, the rival." My heart skipped a beat. He was supposed to be the enemy, but there was no aggression in his posture, no challenge in his gaze, only a polite curiosity. "Ivy," I answered, my voice barely a whisper. "I know," he said softly. "The wolfless mate. Your story has traveled far." He saw me flinch at the title, and a look of genuine regret crossed his face. "My apologies. That was tactless. Your pack may define you by what you lack, but I am more interested in what you possess." I stared at him, stunned into silence. No one had ever spoken to me like that. He didn't loom. He didn't command. He simply talked to me. He asked about the ancient texts I studied, his green eyes lighting up with genuine interest when I spoke of pack histories. He treated me not as a wolfless pariah or an alpha's fated possession, but as an equal, an intellectual. He made me feel seen. "Power is not always a thing of fang and claw, Ivy," he said, his gaze serious. "Sometimes it is knowledge, strategy, the ability to see what others cannot." He paused, his next words changing everything. "My pack values that kind of power. We cultivate it." He looked directly at me. "There would be a place for you with the Shadowcrest Pack, a position of honor, as an advisor, a strategist, an equal. No mating bond to chain you, no alpha to command you. Just a choice." The world tilted on its axis. Freedom. He was offering me freedom. A life where I would be valued for my mind, not scorned for my missing wolf. A life away from Adrian's suffocating dominance and the pack's relentless hatred. A life I had never even dared to dream of. For the first time since that fateful night, I felt a genuine, terrifying flicker of temptation. Was this it? Was this the escape I had been fighting for? As I stood there, lost in the impossible choice he had laid at my feet, a new shadow fell over us. This one was cold, heavy. The air dropped 10 degrees. The scent of pine and furious ozone choked the air. Adrian stood just a few feet away. His face was a mask of stone, but his golden eyes were blazing with a raw, murderous rage that promised nothing but death. Chapter 12. The Monster's Heart. The walk back to the fortress was a silent, suffocating march. Adrian didn't touch me. He didn't have to. His rage was a physical presence beside me, a storm cloud so dense I could barely breathe. He had dismissed Kian with a single, lethally calm sentence that brooked no argument. Now that chilling calm was directed entirely at me. He led me not to the training room, but to his private study. The one place that felt more like him than any other, filled with old books, strategic maps, and the faint, lonely scent of whiskey. He closed the door behind us, the sound echoing the finality of a gavel. He didn't yell. He didn't roar. He simply turned to me, his golden eyes burning, and asked a question that was quieter and far more dangerous than any shout. "Were you considering it?" My chin lifted automatically. The defiance was a reflex now, my only shield against him. "He offered me a choice," I said, my voice shaking only slightly. "That's more than you ever did. You gave me a command, a cage." The words hit him like a physical blow. I saw it. A flicker of pain in his eyes before the Alpha's mask slammed back into place. But it was too late. I had seen the crack in the stone. He finally understood. His dominance, the very thing his wolf demanded he used to keep me, was the one thing that was driving me away. He turned from me, running a hand through his dark hair in a gesture of pure frustration. He paced the room like the caged wolf he was. "You think this is about a cage," he finally rasped, his back still to me. "You think this is about power, about me wanting a Luna to warm my bed and legitimize my rule." He stopped, resting his hands on the back of a heavy leather chair, his knuckles white. "You're wrong." He turned to face me, and the mask was gone. Utterly. The Alpha was gone. The fury was gone. In its place was a raw, aching vulnerability that stunned me into silence. His golden eyes were filled with a torment I had never seen before. "The first time I lost control," he began, his voice low and haunted. "I was 17. A border skirmish. Nothing major, but they hurt one of mine, and the beast inside me, it broke its leash." He swallowed hard, his gaze distant, lost in a memory that was clearly a living nightmare. "I didn't just defeat them, Ivy, I annihilated them. There was so much blood. When I finally came back to myself, my own pack members were looking at me with terror. They weren't looking at their future Alpha. They were looking at a monster." His confession hung in the air between us, heavy and heartbreaking. "That beast," he whispered, his eyes finding mine again, pleading for me to understand. "It lives inside me, always, pushing, raging, and my entire life has been a war to keep it chained. My duty, my pack, my control, that's all I've ever had to hold the bars in place." He took a hesitant step closer, his hands open at his sides, a gesture of surrender. "And then I saw you, and my wolf, the monster, it didn't want to rage, it wanted to kneel. For the first time in my life, it felt quiet, at peace. That bond, Ivy, it's not a chain for you. It's an anchor for me. Without it..." He trailed off, the unspoken fear a chasm between us. My perception of him shattered. The brutal Alpha, the dominant captor. It was all just armor to contain a man who was terrified of the power he wielded. He wasn't a monster. He was a man afraid of becoming one. "I don't just want you," he confessed, his voice raw with an emotion I couldn't name. "I need you." He was close now, his desperate plea a tangible thing in the air. "Let me claim you, Ivy. Let me complete the bond." My hand rose, seemingly of its own accord. It hovered in the space between us, just inches from the heart of the man who had just shown me his broken soul. And I whispered the only truth I had left. "Not yet. Not until you can prove you need Ivy, not just your anchor." Chapter 13. History. Written in blood. His confession had changed everything. The space between us was no longer a chasm of doubt or a battlefield of wills. It was something fragile, something new, a quiet, tentative bridge built of shared secrets. His vulnerability had been a gift, and it had awakened a desperate need in me to understand the truth of my own past. So I sought out Alara. I found her in the deepest part of the archives, a place that smelled of forgotten histories and crumbling paper. She wasn't surprised to see me. The old she-wolf looked up from a massive, leather-bound tome, her cloudy eyes seeing far more than they should have. "A question has been weighing on your soul, child," she murmured, her voice like the rustle of dry leaves. "My parents?" I said, the words feeling heavy on my tongue. "The official records say they were killed by rogues during a border patrol. But it never felt right. There were no witnesses. No bodies were ever truly identified." Alara was silent for a long time, her gaze searching my face, gauging my strength, my resolve. She was deciding if I was ready, if I could bear the weight of the truth. "The stories we tell ourselves to survive are often the most dangerous cages of all," she finally whispered, closing the ancient book. "And you, little one, were born to be free." What she told me next was not a story. It was an earthquake. It shattered the very foundations of my life, leaving nothing but rubble and a cold, horrifying clarity. She spoke of a lineage that predated the pack system, a bloodline of wolves who didn't just shift. They commanded the very light of the moon, the lunar wolves, a lineage of immense power, a power that could heal the sick, see the future, and soothe the most savage of beasts, a power the High Council feared above all else. "They believed it disrupted the natural order," Alara explained, her voice filled with an ancient sorrow. "They believed it was a power too great for any one wolf to hold. So they hunted them, wiped them from the pages of history, made their existence a mere fairy tale." My blood ran cold. I knew what was coming next, but I was not prepared for the pain of the words. "Your mother," Alara said, her hand gently covering mine. "She was the last. She and your father hid her identity, living a simple life here, praying the bloodline would fade with them. But it didn't. It awoke in you, stronger than ever before, even in the womb." Tears I didn't know I was holding began to fall. "They weren't on a border patrol, Ivy. They were running, trying to get you away from here before the council discovered what you were. But they were caught." "Rogues didn't kill my parents," I choked out, the truth a shard of ice in my heart. "No, child," Alara confirmed, her eyes filled with a fierce, protective light. "The High Council did. They murdered your mother and father in cold blood, because they were terrified of the power sleeping inside their newborn daughter. The grief was a tidal wave. It crashed over me, pulling me under into a sea of unimaginable loss. But as the wave receded, it left something else behind on the shore of my shattered heart. Not despair, not fear, but a cold, hard, terrifying fury. My entire life had been a lie. My parents' memory had been a lie. I was not wolfless Ivy, the pack's pathetic outcast. I was the last of a murdered bloodline, the survivor of an assassination. My purpose was no longer just survival, it was vengeance. Chapter 14. Scars and Allegiance. She returned to my study late that night. The moon was a sharp sliver in the sky, casting long, skeletal shadows across the floor. I knew the moment she stepped into the room that something had changed. The grief was there, a raw, open wound in her scent. But beneath it was a core of forged steel, a deadly, beautiful purpose. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She simply stood before me, her stormy eyes clear and resolute, and told me everything Alara had said. She told me about the lunar wolves, about the High Council, about the murder of her parents. She didn't come to me with accusations or questions. She came to me as an equal, an ally. She laid the broken pieces of her past at my feet, and in doing so, offered me a level of trust I had done nothing to earn. That single act of faith shattered the last of my defenses. My need to protect her, to stand with her, became an all-consuming fire. She had trusted me with her truth. She deserved the rest of mine. "The incident I told you about," I began, my voice rough. "The one where I lost control. It wasn't a simple border skirmish." I gestured for her to sit, but she remained standing, a silent partner in this confession. It was a setup, orchestrated by the High Council. I paced in front of the fireplace, the memories a bitter poison on my tongue. "They sent my patrol into an ambush, not rogues, mercenaries, highly trained. Their goal wasn't to kill us, but to provoke me, to push me past my breaking point." I stopped, forcing myself to meet her gaze, to let her see the shame I had hidden for so long. There were human families living on the edge of that territory. The council told us they had been evacuated. They lied. The mercenaries drove the fight directly into their settlement. It was chaos. Fire. Screaming. My voice broke. My wolf whimpered in my chest, the memory of his failure as sharp today as it was a decade ago. When I lost control, I couldn't tell the difference between enemy and innocent. I saw only threats. When the red rage finally cleared, I had to force the next words out. 2 of those families were dead. A mother, a father, their children. The council's official report said the mercenaries killed them. But I know the truth. I can still smell their blood on my hands. It was my deepest shame, the secret that fueled my fear of my own beast. The council had used it as leverage ever since, a silent blackmail to ensure my compliance. I expected to see disgust in her eyes, pity, fear. Instead, I saw empathy, a deep, profound understanding that went beyond words. She stepped forward, her small hand coming to rest on my arm. Her touch wasn't a brand of fire this time. It was a balm, a quiet promise. "They used your strength against you," she whispered, "just as they used my parents' love against them. It's what they do." In that moment, we were no longer just an alpha and his fated mate. We were 2 survivors, 2 soldiers in the same war fighting the same enemy. Our individual causes had just merged into one. The moment of profound connection was shattered by a sharp rap on the door. Marcus entered, his face grim, his eyes flicking nervously between me and Ivy. "Alpha," he said, his voice tense. "You have a visitor." I felt a cold dread snake down my spine. "Who?" "High Counselor Kale," Marcus announced. "He has arrived unannounced, and he is convening a formal pack court in the morning." The enemy was no longer a shadow. He was at my door, and he had come for her. Chapter 15. The Luna's Voice. The great hall was arranged for a trial. The air was thick with tension and the smell of fear. High Counselor Kyle sat on a carved chair beside Adrian's throne, a smug, self-satisfied viper in our den. He was all smooth words and cold reptilian eyes. He spoke of pack unity and council oversight, but his every word was a subtle knife, meant to undermine Adrian's authority and question his judgment. And his gaze kept flicking to me, a predator sizing up its prey. I sat in a chair slightly below and to the side of Adrian. I was on display, the wolfless anomaly, the alpha's folly. I could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on me, but for the first time, it didn't make my skin crawl. The fire of my newfound purpose was a warm, steady shield around my heart. My fear was gone, burned away by the cold fury of a daughter whose parents had been stolen from her. Of course, Lyra couldn't resist the opportunity. She rose from her seat among the pack elites, her expression a perfect mask of concerned subservience. "High Counselor," she began, her voice ringing with false sincerity. "While we are honored by your presence, some of us are concerned. Our alpha is strong, but his recent distraction." She let her gaze slide to me, dripping with contempt. She sits by his side, yet she says nothing. How can a Luna lead with silence? How can we follow a shadow? A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembled wolves. They were eating it up. They were used to my silence. They expected me to shrink, to look to Adrian for protection, to prove Lyra's point for her. I felt Adrian's entire body tense beside me, a low growl starting in his chest, but before he could speak, I laid a hand on his arm. A silent request. "Let me." He looked down at me, his golden eyes filled with surprise and a flash of fierce pride. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Slowly, I rose to my feet. I did not look at Lyra. To acknowledge her would be to give her power. Instead, I turned my calm, steady gaze directly to the High Counselor. "Silence is a curious thing, isn't it, High Counselor Kale?" I asked, my voice not loud, but clear and carrying in the suddenly quiet hall. "Some use it to hide their weakness." My eyes flicked to Lyra for a fraction of a second. "Others use it to hide their intentions." My gaze returned to Kale, sharp and pointed. "A wise wolf knows when to listen," I continued, taking a step forward. "They listen to the rustle of leaves that betrays an ambush. They listen to the frantic heartbeat that betrays a lie. And they listen to the whispers of history, the stories that some would rather keep buried in the dust." A gasp went through the crowd. It was a direct, unmistakable challenge. Lyra's face had gone pale. The pack was staring at me as if they had never seen me before. And in a way, they hadn't. But Kale did not look surprised. The smugness didn't falter. He simply watched me, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his lips. It was a smile that said he hadn't seen me as prey at all. He had seen me as the game itself. "It seems the alpha's choice has a voice after all," he purred, his tone slick with menace. "This should prove to be a very interesting visit." The battle lines had just been drawn in front of the entire pack, and as I stood there, holding the High Counselor's chilling gaze, I knew with absolute certainty there was no turning back. Chapter 16. The Serpent's Tooth. The first blast of the war horn was a death knell. Chaos erupted in a heartbeat. The scent of enemy wolves, the sandalwood and stone of Shadowcrest, flooded our territory, a tide of violence crashing against our defenses. The attack was too fast, too coordinated. It was as if they knew our every patrol route, our every weak point. There was no time for strategy. There was only the shift. Bone and sinew tore and reshaped. A scream of human pain became the guttural roar of the beast. My wolf surged forward, a black-furred whirlwind of rage and death at the heart of the battle. Claws met flesh. Fangs tore through sinew. The world became a red-tinted blur of motion and instinct. The metallic tang of blood a welcome tang on my tongue. I fought back-to-back with Marcus, my beta, my brother in all but blood. Our movements were a familiar deadly dance, a rhythm of slash and feint we'd perfected over 100 battles. But something was wrong. For every enemy we took down, 2 more seemed to pour through a new breach in our lines. They moved with an unnatural certainty, exploiting gaps that shouldn't have existed. It was more than a simple assault. It was an execution. And we were the ones on the block. A cold dread, colder than any battle fear, began to seep into my bones. We were being dismantled from the inside out. In the heart of the swirling melee, I ripped the throat out of a Shadowcrest warrior and spun to face Marcus. "We're being flanked from the West Ridge. They shouldn't know about that path. Take your unit and—" My words were cut short, not by a roar, not by a clash of claws, but by a searing white-hot agony that erupted in my back. A pain so profound, so shocking, it stole the breath from my lungs and the strength from my limbs. I stumbled forward, my wolf screaming in disbelief. A blade forged with silver and laced with the biting poison of wolfsbane slid from between my ribs. My legs gave out. I crashed to the ground, the shift receding in a wave of unbearable pain, leaving me trapped in my vulnerable human form. I twisted, my head spinning, my gaze locking on the impossible. It was Marcus, my beta, my friend. His face was not the face of a brother, but the twisted, zealous mask of a fanatic. He held the bloody knife in his hand, his eyes burning with a righteous fire. "The council grows tired of your defiance, Alpha," he snarled, the word alpha a venomous insult. "They require an anchor, but a rabid beast is best put down." The betrayal was a blade sharper than the one in my back. It cut deeper, severing a bond I had trusted my entire life. I tried to rise. I tried to speak her name, but my limbs wouldn't obey. My world dissolved into a vortex of pain as the battle raged on around my fallen body. My last conscious thought was of her. Ivy. Chapter 17. A Vow of Malice. The infirmary was a canvas of nightmares painted in blood and fear. Wounded silver-fang wolves lay on cots, their pained groans a constant, terrible chorus. I moved among them, a frantic, useless ghost, my hands stained with the blood of Adrian's people. My training had not prepared me for this. My knowledge of herbs and salves was a child's toy in the face of such carnage. Every instinct screamed for Adrian, for the safety of his presence, the certainty of his power. Then I heard it. A howl that was not a war cry but a sound of pure, soul-shattering agony. Adrian's howl. It ripped through the chaos of the battle and struck me right in the heart. The world stopped. He was hurt. He was in pain. Before I could even process the terror of that thought, the doors to the infirmary burst open. But it wasn't our warriors retreating. It was the enemy. And leading them, a cruel, triumphant smile on her face, was Lyra. She didn't look at the wounded. She didn't look at the healers. She looked only at me. "Heard the news?" she purred, her voice dripping with years of pent-up hatred. "Your precious Alpha has fallen. It seems a wolf without a pack and is just as useless as a girl without a wolf." Her words didn't make sense. Fallen? But my confusion was drowned out by her next action. She gestured to the Shadowcrest warriors. "Secure the healers. She is mine." The world tilted. Lyra, a spy, a traitor? It was impossible. But the vicious glee in her eyes was all too real. "All my life!" she spat, stalking toward me, her body beginning to tremble with the impending shift. "I have worked. I have trained. I was supposed to be the one at his side, and he chose you." Bone cracked and fur sprouted. A broken, little, nothing. She lunged, a monster of gray fur and yellow fangs. I reacted on pure instinct. I dodged, using the skills Adrian had beaten into me. I used a cot as a shield, my mind racing. I was strong. I was a fighter. But I was human. She was a force of nature. She swiped, her claws shredding the wooden cot like paper. I ducked and weaved, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I managed to land a solid blow with a heavy metal tray, stunning her for a second. A flicker of surprise, of respect almost, flashed in her wolfish eyes, but it wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. She cornered me against the far wall. She was faster, stronger, inevitable. Her clawed hand lashed out. A searing pain exploded across my ribs as I was thrown across the room, my head cracking against the stone floor. Darkness swam at the edge of my vision. The coppery scent of my own blood filled my nostrils. Lyra stood over me, savoring the moment, her chest heaving. "Now you'll die like the pathetic trash you are." My strength was gone. My hope was gone. My body was broken. She was right. Chapter 18. The Longest Silence Pain. A universe of silver fire and betrayal. Through the red-hazed fog of agony, Adrian forced his head up. He could hear Marcus shouting orders, his orders, to the pack, to the traitors. He had to get up. He had to get to Ivy. His vision cleared for a single horrifying second. Across the clearing, through the swirling chaos of bodies and blood. He saw it. The infirmary. Its thatched roof was burning, vomiting black smoke into the night sky. And in the doorway, silhouetted against the flames, was Lyra, standing over a small, broken figure on the ground. Ivy. A roar of pure, helpless fury ripped from his throat, a sound that was more beast than man. He tried to surge to his feet, but the wolfsbane was a lead weight in his veins. He was trapped, forced to watch. The sounds of the battle faded away. The world narrowed to the glint in Lyra's eyes and the sharp, metallic taste in Ivy's mouth. This was it. The end. Her deepest fear, realized in blood and fire. She was never strong enough. Her training, her defiance, her fragile hope. It had all been a child's game against real monsters. He was gone. The pack was falling. There was nothing left to fight for. She was so tired. She thought of his golden eyes, the surprising sound of his laughter, the raw, desperate vulnerability on his face in the study. I need you. A single tear traced a clean path through the blood and grime on her cheek. She closed her eyes, resigned. Ready? He saw Lyra raise a clawed hand for the final blow. He howled her name, a desperate, broken sound lost in the din of war. No. She felt the air shift above her. She braced for the end. All was lost. But the killing blow never landed. Instead, a new sound shattered the air. It was not a Silverfang howl. It was not a Shadowcrest howl. It was a sound of pure, impossible power. A note of celestial music, a chord of starlight and silver fire that ripped through the night. It made the very moon itself seem to tremble in the sky. And it was coming from her. Chapter 19. The Silver Fire. From the endless, silent darkness of defeat. A flicker. A single, warm spark ignited in the hollow space where Ivy's wolf should have been. It wasn't a thought. It wasn't a memory. It was a feeling. Like the first ray of dawn after the longest night. The searing pain in her ribs. The crushing weight of despair. It all began to dissolve, burned away by a rising silver fire. This was not the violent, tearing agony of a normal shift. There was no screaming, no breaking of bone. It was a song, a celestial music that reshaped her from the inside out. Power, pure, limitless, and ancient, surged through her veins. Light, brilliant, and silver poured from her skin, from her eyes, from the very wounds that should have killed her. Lyra stumbled back, her eyes wide with terror, shielding her face from the blinding radiance. Ivy rose, but it was not the broken girl who got to her feet. It was a wolf unlike any seen in 1,000 years. Her fur was not gray or brown or black, but the color of spun moonlight, shimmering with an ethereal inner light. She was larger than any other wolf on the field, yet she moved with a fluid, impossible grace. Her eyes were not the gold of a pack wolf, but twin pools of liquid silver, holding the wisdom of ages. This was not a beast of rage. This was a creature of power, the lunar wolf of legend. Reborn. From across the battlefield, Adrian saw it, an explosion of pure white light from the heart of the infirmary. The wolfsbane poison was a fire in his veins, but this new light was a soothing balm, pushing back the darkness, clearing his head. He watched, breathless, as the radiant wolf emerged from the inferno. The wolf from the histories, the creature from Alara's forbidden texts. It was real, and it was Ivy. Awe, profound and soul-shaking, crashed over him. A desperate, hopeful love swelled in his chest. Ivy. He staggered to his feet, his half-healed body screaming in protest, and took a step toward her, toward his mate. But the magnificent silver wolf turned to face him, and there was no recognition in her ancient silver eyes, no sign of the girl he had fought with, the woman he had kissed. There was only a primal, instinctual distrust. She saw not Adrian, her mate, her ally. She saw a dominant alpha, a potential threat, a cage. A low, rumbling growl echoed from her chest, a sound like shifting starlight and shattering stone. She lowered her head, bearing immaculate white fangs. His magnificent, reborn mate was preparing to attack him.
Chapter 20. The Alpha's Surrender. He stood before a goddess, a legend made flesh, and she was going to tear him apart. His own wolf roared in his head. Challenge her, subdue her, she is ours. The instinct to meet her power with his own was a physical, clawing need. It was the alpha's way. It was the only way he had ever known. But he looked into her silver eyes, eyes that held the wisdom of the moon itself, and he knew, with a certainty that went deeper than instinct, that this was the final test. Dominance had failed him with Ivy. It had pushed her away. It had nearly cost him everything. To use it now, against this magnificent, primal part of her soul, it would not be a victory. It would be the ultimate loss. He had to choose. The alpha, or the man who loved her. It was no choice at all. Ignoring the gasps of his loyal warriors, ignoring the stunned confusion of his enemies, he did the one thing an alpha should never do. Slowly, deliberately, he sank to his knees in the blood-soaked dirt. He had eyes only for her, for the radiant, snarling wolf who held his heart in her jaws. With a final act of absolute faith, he lowered his head, baring his throat in the ultimate gesture of surrender. An offering, a plea. He was hers, in this life and the next. The wolf inside Ivy stilled. The raw, primal instinct that saw the powerful alpha as a threat went silent. It watched the act of surrender, a language it understood more deeply than thought. It saw not a challenge, but a truth, a devotion. Then a voice echoed in the quiet spaces of her new soul. It did not come from her ears, but from the bond that had always been there, now blazing with light. I don't want your power. I want you, Ivy. Adrian's voice, his heart, his surrender, the human girl who had always been afraid, and the ancient, powerful wolf who had never known fear, finally met, and they merged into one. Acceptance. She took a single, deliberate step forward. The great silver wolf nudged the bowed head of the kneeling alpha with her muzzle. A gentle, definitive touch. The mating bond, once a fragile, contested thread, slammed into place. It was not a chain. It was a circuit, a conduit of shared power, shared thought, shared soul. His strength was hers. Her light was his. They were one. And together, they turned to face the war. Chapter 21. The tide turns. A howl split the air, but this time it was two voices singing a single terrifying song, the dark timber wolf howl of the alpha and the silver starlight howl of the Luna. The sound was not of this earth. It was a physical blow of sound and power that sent their enemies staggering back in terror. For the loyal Silver Fang warriors, it was a different kind of blow. It was a wave of pure hope, of impossible strength, that washed over them and reignited their dying spirits. The wolfsbane poison in Adrian's veins vanished, burned away to nothing by the pure silver fire of the completed bond. He rose to his feet, no longer the wounded, betrayed alpha, but a king restored to his full, terrible glory. Ivy stood beside him, not behind him, beside him. A radiant silver wolf, her fur glowing in the dark, her silver eyes burning with a cold, focused light. They didn't need to speak. They didn't need a plan. They moved. He was the darkness. She was the light. He was the fury. She was the focus. He was the unstoppable force. She was the immovable object. The tide of the battle didn't just turn. It shattered. Their coordinated charge was a thing of beautiful, lethal poetry. Adrian carved through the enemy ranks, a black-furred reaper of vengeance. But where he brought the fury of the storm, Ivy brought the cold, quiet certainty of the abyss. Her light didn't just burn, it judged. It seemed to seep into the souls of their enemies, showing them their own cowardice, their own betrayal. They fell before her not just from her claws, but from the sheer weight of her ancient righteous power. The Shadowcrest warriors, who had fought with such brutal efficiency, broke into a panicked, chaotic rout. They fled from the impossible sight of the Alpha and Luna, who fought as one being. The Silverfang warriors, who had been on the brink of defeat just moments before, surged forward with a renewed, ferocious strength. They were no longer just fighting for their territory. They were fighting for their goddess. Adrian and Ivy carved a path of silver and shadow through the battlefield, a force of nature that could not be stopped. They moved through the chaos as if it were still water, their eyes fixed on their single goal. They came to a halt in the center of the clearing, the battle raging around them but giving them a wide berth. They stood before the architects of all this pain. The sneering, shocked face of Alpha Cian, the traitorous, hate-filled glare of Marcus, and the pathetic, terrified whimper of Lyra. The final confrontation was about to begin. Chapter 22, A Symphony of Silver and Shadow. The world narrowed to the three traitors standing before them. Cian, his handsome face twisted with the snarl of a cornered animal, lunged first. He went for Adrian, a clash of alphas, a storm of black fur and brown, a battle of raw, untamed power. But this time, Adrian was not alone. He met Cian's charge, his claws tearing, his fangs snapping. Yet where mindless rage once would have consumed him, there was now a profound calm. He could feel Ivy through the bond, a cool silver stream of focus pouring into his soul. She was his anchor, his center. He was not a monster fighting in the dark. He was a king, fighting in the light of his queen. He moved with a precision and power he had never known, his every blow guided by a purpose that was clearer and sharper than simple vengeance. He fought for his pack, for his mate, for the future she represented. Ivy did not join the brutal dance of alphas. Her war was fought on a different front. She moved like a phantom of moonlight toward the remaining two, toward Marcus and Lyra. They stood frozen, their treachery exposed, their allies defeated. Fear, a thick, acrid stench poured off them. Lyra shifted back to her human form, a pathetic, trembling thing. Marcus held a silver knife, his last defense against a goddess. Ivy did not shift. She did not snarl. She simply raised her head to the full moon and let her power flow. It was not a wave of violence. It was a wave of pure, undeniable truth. A silver light washed over the battlefield, a light that didn't burn, but illuminated. Every Silverfang warrior saw Marcus not as their former beta, but as a serpent who had poisoned their home. They saw Lyra not as a pack elite, but as a venomous child consumed by jealousy. The light stripped them bare, leaving their corrupted souls exposed for all to see. They didn't need to be defeated. They were already broken. With a final, powerful move, Adrian slammed Cian to the ground, his fangs at the rival Alpha's throat. The battle was won. He could end it. He could end him. The old Adrian would have. But he looked at the defeated wolf, and for the first time, he offered something other than death. Mercy. He pulled back, a low growl of finality in his chest. Defeated and strangely humbled, Cian bowed his head in surrender. At the same time, Ivy stood before the cowering traitors. Marcus dropped his knife. Lyra was sobbing. Their power, built on lies and deceit, had crumbled to dust before her light. The fighting was over. The silence that fell over the battlefield was not the silence of death. It was the silence of awe. Chapter 23, The Breaking of Chains. In the aftermath of the battle, the Silverfang pack gathered in the clearing. They were wounded, weary, but they were not defeated. They were reborn. They stood before their Alpha and their new Luna, their eyes filled not with fear of his power, but with reverence for hers. The judgment of the traitors was swift. Adrian stood before Marcus, the man who had been his father's right hand, the wolf he had called brother. There was no rage left in him, only a deep, profound sorrow. You betrayed our blood, our bond, our history. Adrian's voice was calm, but it carried the weight of a mountain. Death would be a mercy, and you, Marcus, are owed no mercy. He raised his hand. By the law of the first pact, I declare you packless. Your name is struck from our histories. Your scent is cast from our territory. You will be a ghost in the wild, forever alone. No pack will have you. No wolf will call you brother. It was a fate worse than death, a living damnation. Marcus let out a broken, animalistic cry as the pack collectively turned their backs on him, severing the bonds of magic and kinship. Lyra received the same sentence. She was dragged away, screaming and pleading, a ghost before she had even left their sight. The poison had been purged. Then, with Ivy a radiant, calming presence at his side, Adrian turned to his pack. "For generations," he began, his voice ringing with a new, clearer authority. "We have lived under the shadow of the High Council. We have bowed to their laws, feared their judgment, and trusted their lies." He looked out at the faces of his people. "That ends tonight. The Council did this. They orchestrated this attack. They used our enemies and they corrupted our own to maintain their grip on us." Then Ivy stepped forward. Her voice, no longer a whisper, but a current of quiet strength washed over them. "The Council's greatest lie was the story of my parents." She told them everything. The truth of the lunar wolves, the history of the Council's murderous purge, the assassination of her parents to extinguish a light they could not control. She told her story not with anger, but with a grace that gave her words an undeniable power. She was not a wolfless curse. She was the last daughter of a sacred, hunted line, the living proof of the Council's corruption. A new understanding dawned on the faces of the pack, the chains of fear and superstition that the Council had wrapped around them for centuries. Shattered, they were free. And as they looked at the Alpha of Shadow and the Luna of Light standing together, they knew a new era had just begun.
Chapter 24. To Rise. 1 month later, another full moon shone down on the great clearing. But this was a different night, a different world. The air wasn't thick with tension or the promise of violence. It was filled with the sounds of laughter, of pups playing, and of a hope so bright it seemed to rival the moon itself. It was the night of my Luna ceremony. I stood at Adrian's side, not as his possession, but as his partner. The ceremonial silver robes felt impossibly light on my shoulders. I was no longer a ghost hiding in the shadows of the pack. I was its heart. Throughout the night, they came to me. The same wolves who had once called me trash, who had sneered at my silence, now approached with their heads bowed in genuine respect. They didn't just see the magnificent lunar wolf of legend. They saw Ivy, the girl who had faced down a high counselor with her quiet words, the Luna who had healed the pack's broken spirit with her truth. I accepted their fealty not with the arrogance of an alpha, but with a gentle nod and a quiet smile, with a strength I had never known I possessed. When the last of the celebrations had faded, Adrian and I found ourselves alone on the high ridge overlooking our territory. The land below was peaceful, bathed in the silver light of the moon. The bond between us was no longer a raging fire or a contested thread. It was a calm, steady warmth, a deep, silent river of love and acceptance. There was no more fighting, no more doubt, only peace. He stood beside me, his hand finding mine, his fingers lacing through mine as if they had been made to fit there. He didn't say anything for a long time. He just looked at me, his golden eyes full of a profound love that went deeper than any faded bond. It was a love that was chosen, a love that was earned. "Ivy," he finally whispered, his voice full of an awe that still, after all this time, made my heart skip a beat. I looked up at him, the moonlight catching in the new silver streaks in my hair, my once stormy eyes now as calm and clear as a mountain lake. I thought of the terrified girl hiding in the library, of the defiant fighter training in the dark, of the broken victim bleeding out on the infirmary floor. They were all a part of me. They had all led me here, to this moment, to this man, to this peace. I smiled, a real, radiant smile that came from the very depths of my soul. "I was never weak," I whispered, the words a vow to him and a promise to myself. I was waiting to rise.